Every Sunday morning for 11 years, and I am appalled at what is happening in Washington, D.C. and around the country with the regime of Donald Trump. And I came up with a little kind of call and response questionnaire. I have 10 questions here, and this is called the No Kings Rally. So I'm gonna list 10 things that I want you to tell me whether this act reminds you of a president or a king. Is this the sort of thing you would expect from the President of the United States, or something you would expect from someone who's trying to be a king? Okay, you with me? So I'm gonna say what the item is. You tell me, is it a king or a president? Here's the first one. Number one, without any permission, without asking any consent from the historical folks that oversee these things, this person destroyed the east wing of the White House in Washington, D.C. This sounds like a king, right? Okay. How about this? I just drove through Washington, D.C. about 3 weeks ago, and I drove past the Justice Department, and this person has hung a gigantic picture of himself scowling at America from the Justice Department. Does that sound like something a president would do, or a king? King! Okay, so far, you're batting 1,000. Okay? How about someone who decides on a whim to blow up private fishing vessels on the open seas with no legal challenge or no permission from anybody, just taking the U.S. Navy and blowing up fishing vessels? Sound like a president? King. Sounds like a king to me. How about you just decide one day to kidnap the president of Venezuela and drag him to New York City? Sound like a president? King. Sounds like a king to me. Okay. How about someone who absolutely grifted and grafted and stole billions of dollars from the U.S. government while cutting funds for health, for education, for welfare, for legal representation? Sound like a king? Yeah, sound like a king. This one is very important to me. I'm married to a woman who grew up in Minnesota. We're going out to Minnesota. We have friends that are in Minnesota at the No Kings Day today. So I'm going to say, how about this? How about someone who authorized ICE, which I call an illegal criminal enterprise, to illegitimately detain, injure, and murder U.S. citizens, American citizens? Sound like a president? King. Sounds like somebody who's trying to be a king. Okay, how about this one? This is a relatively new one. To order the U.S. Mint to print a gold coin with his image on the gold coin and force them to do that. Sound like a kind of presidential thing? That's a king. Okay? How about when you're under pressure because your best friend, who you called your best friend for a decade, Jeffrey Epstein, his papers are being released and you're all over him? How about you start blowing up countries around the world with U.S. missiles and bombs? Sound like a president? King. Sounds like a king to me. How about casually threatening to invade and take over Greenland? Yeah. You ever think you'd hear the day when a U.S. president would do something like that? And finally, how about this one? For the first time in 250 years of having currency in the United States of America, the President of the United States decides that he is going to put his signature on a dollar bill. Sound like a president? King. This is not normal. It's not appropriate. It's not right, it's not legal, it's not ethical, and it's not moral. And what we need to do, we all know that there's a full court press on to take over the midterm elections. And Donald Trump and the Republicans will do everything they can to make sure that you don't vote in the midterm elections, because they've said it themselves. They said if you vote and you vote the Republicans out and the Democrats in, that's the end of the Trump reign. And they don't want that to happen. And that's why we have to make that happen. And I'm an old man, but I'm a man who cares about the state of Maine and cares about this nation. I remember I went around with John Baldacci and Tom Allen and Michael Chitwood and some other folks. This is years ago when we were fighting for the first gay rights marriage referendum in the state of Maine. And I went around because it was my job. Yes, exactly. And it was my job description. If you haven't heard any of my 10 or 12 comedy albums or seen any of my TV specials, I can't help you with that. But my job is to understand Maine people and how Maine people think and what Maine values are. And I remember when I was on the stump for the first gay rights referendum, and we were somewhere up and around Madawaska or something, and I said, look, this is what I can tell you about Maine people. They're not that interested in what you're doing in the bedroom. What they want to know is, do you have jumper cables and will you stop? And so this is a jumper cable moment. We've got to show up and do the next right thing and help our neighbors and get ICE out of the state of Maine and get Donald Trump out of the White House. Thank you very much.